Welcome to the Growth Engine podcast. In today's episode, we're joined by Alex Leay, Group Head of Wholesale Marketing and Head of UK Marketing at HSBC Asset Management. Alex's tenure at HSBC spans over a decade. During this time, she has steered the marketing strategy across a global landscape. Her journey from the Head of UK Wholesale Marketing to her current dual role requires a blend of both strategic vision and practical implementation. Alex's previous roles at Reuters as the Global Head of External Marketing Comms has equipped her with a unique perspective on the financial services marketing domain. Now, her leadership at HSBC Asset Management is marked by innovative approaches to overcoming traditional marketing challenges, leveraging technology and driving growth within a regulatory and globally diverse environment. In this episode, we'll dive into her strategies for aligning global marketing campaigns with local market needs, her approach to managing teams across different regions, and navigating regulatory challenges to make HSBC Asset Management stand out in a competitive landscape of financial services. Alex, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Could you start us off by giving us a little bit of background about your journey, how you got to your, I'm going to read this out because you've got a long title, two titles in fact, your journey to becoming the Group Head of Wholesale Marketing and Head of UK Marketing for HSBC Asset Management. And also thinking back to how your previous roles have influenced your strategies within the broader financial services sector.
Yeah, well, I think I've actually had probably quite a traditional sort of career in marketing, in that I actually started out in events. So, and I think that was really good. I had an events role at Reuters, so now Thomson Reuters, and also at the CBI, the Confederation of British Industry. And I think, both those roles really helped me to understand the value of the client experience. It's very important. Attention to detail is very, very important. And that end-to-end client experience is really, really important. And then the other thing about working in events is you really have to demonstrate the return on investment, the return on event spend. Event spend, in the industry I'm in now, is quite significant in some cases. So you really have to demonstrate the return on that. And it's not about the food and the flowers. It's also about, the client experience, as I mentioned, and the value you're getting from that. So I think that was a great sort of foundation in terms of my career. I then went back to Thomson Reuters, actually. So I was lucky to be asked back and sort of developed into a more broad marketing role. And that was really interesting. But it also gave me that very sort of deep technical knowledge and sort of that grounding for financial services. So there we were marketing, something you couldn't see, you couldn't touch it. It was market data. So, how to market data to, sort of a professional audience that was market data and IT managers at that point that we were marketing to, really gave me, again, that sort of that foundation and that depth. And it became really technical, so technical, in fact, that I sort of thought, oh, I'm not sure if this is for me. I think I'm actually going to become become part of the business. Do I want to do that, or do I want to continue with my marketing path? And I'm very passionate about marketing, so wanted to stay in the marketing arena. And then an opportunity came up at HSBC. So I went across to HSBC Asset Management and have been there ever since. So, coming around 15 years now.
Right.
Yeah, so a long time. And what's great about working for a large organisation is the sort of the variety of roles and experiences you can get. So, I started in the UK business. I've held various marketing roles throughout my career at HSBC Asset Management. I've worked across different client segments, so wholesale, institutional, retail. I've held global roles, regional roles.
Wow.
So I think I've had a good, quite a good broad experience. And as you said, now I am what we call double hatting, and so I'm head of UK marketing and then also the global head of wholesale marketing. So it's been a great journey.
How do you manage those two hats, so to speak?
I mean, I think it's a really great role because, I have my global hat on. I have that global experience, that very strategic role. But also what's important when you're in a global role is that you don't forget what it's like to be in a local market or a local country. So actually being head of UK marketing, as well also really helps, because you've
Yeah.
always got that temperature test of what's happening in a particular market.
Yeah. Yeah.
My global role is wholesale, but my local role is across all the segments, so institutional, product marketing,
Right.
etc.
Right.
So, it gives me that great balance.
You mentioned leaving Thomson Reuters was it allowed you to kind of continue with that love that you had developed
Yeah.
in marketing. Did you study marketing?
I did. So I did a broad sort of business degree at
Okay.
university, of which marketing was a module, and I think that's where I kind of developed my passion for
Yeah. Yeah.
marketing. And then many moons ago, when I had graduated, I did a sort of post grad diploma in marketing.
Right.
So
Right.
to really kind of try and get that deep theoretical knowledge.
Yeah. That's interesting to know. There's been I've read a lot of material that talks about marketers, and how few marketers working within financial services have actually studied it before they came into the industry. So
Yeah.
I'm always intrigued just to know whether people did study or not, or if they continue to learn, or So
Yeah, no, I did study marketing, but I think that sort of previous experience, that broad sort of business or management, where you get that taste of, whether that's HR, accountancy, legal, all these things actually really play into a marketing role.
I mean, talking of around the volume of education or lack of, maybe, within marketing. I know we've spoken about this on a previous call, but the term colouring in department, the stereotype, the disparaging term, I still hear that today. Is that something that you've come across within your
I've
tenure?
heard of it, but
Okay.
luckily I've never been directly. It's never been directly referred to in front of me, which is probably a good thing. But yeah, I mean, I think we have to demonstrate the value of marketing in any organisation. Some organizations marketing has a very prominent seat at the table, and other organizations it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think for HSBC Asset Management, I really feel we do have an equal and prominent seat at the table. So
Mm.
which is great.
You've mentioned that your previous experience coming from events and how you had to prove the ROI
Yeah,
from event spend.
yeah,
Obviously, the role of marketing is to grow the business, win the business. So if it's being done well, it should be a growth driver. How does within your roles at HSBC Asset Management, how are you proving that as a growth driver within the business?
yeah. It's really important, because we don't just want to be seen as marketing as a cost. We have to show the strategic value that marketing can bring, and like you said, that how do we contribute to that growth of the business. I think there are a few things that I've done, and I sort of developed as I've developed my career to sort of help with that. One of them, I think, is to have very collaborative conversations with the sort of senior leadership and your senior stakeholders, and really agree what the marketing objectives are,
Yeah.
and how they align with the business objectives, and how they drive the growth.
Okay.
And
How
doing
they
that,
ladder up.
how they ladder up,
Yeah.
exactly. And doing that very early in any conversations, and getting that agreement right at the beginning is really, really important, because it's obviously your stakeholders, but also for your teams,
Yeah.
and the wider marketing community. How do we know that we're all driving towards the same goal,
Yeah.
and that goal is adding value, and it's driving business growth, and it's not, to your earlier point, just colouring in, and
Yeah.
and the aesthetics. So everyone knows that they're on that path. Everyone knows where we're going. And as part of that sort of objective setting, I think the metrics that you're going to measure are really important. So everyone will be at a different stage of their journey when it comes to marketing metrics and measurement, etc. But I think anything that you can do will be valuable. So whether you're sort of in a sophisticated environment or conversation where you're talking about attribution models, or whether you're talking about sales lead generation or marketing lead generation, or whatever that is, you
Mm.
really, again, agree those things up front, and make
Yeah.
sure everybody's aware and bought into that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
How often do you have those conversations with the wider business about what the strategic objectives are of the business, and how marketing's role can contribute to those achieving those objectives?
I think there are different stages to it. I think there's obviously an annual planning process,
Yeah.
and that's a big part of it. But then any framework has to be able to flex as as the business
Of
changes,
course,
as the industry changes,
and it's
as
a
clients,
fast-changing environment at the
it
moment.
is, client needs change, and you've
Yeah.
got to really, be on top of that as well. So for us, we might be doing that quarterly, like checking in, and just making sure that our objectives are aligned. But equally, it's not just the strategic plan, but it's every activity that you do, every campaign that you're
Yeah.
implementing and executing and planning, every sort of big piece of activity. Have you agreed the objectives? Can you see how those objectives ladder up to the overall business and marketing objectives? And again, so everybody who's working on that piece understands how these things all link up.
I'm going to come back to that idea, and Lex, I'm keen to understand how you then start feeding that into your team and determining whether activity's been successful from like either on a campaign level. But
Yeah.
let's park that for a second. One of your roles is global. I know that when we've spoken, you talked to me about setting up a global campaign framework. I'm interested to hear more about how you did that, how you then aligned global priorities with local needs. Can you talk to me about that? 'Cause for me, from an outsider, that seems that there could be competing priorities there.
Yeah, and of course the word campaign can mean lots of different things to different people. So for us, this means sort of sales and marketing campaigns together. So what are the products that we are, focusing on, or the priority areas? And like many organisations, we have global products, or products that are sold into different markets. And what I had noticed, and this was several years ago, is that different markets would be creating marketing activity on the same
Hmm.
products. We didn't necessarily have consistency of messaging. But the positive thing about the local markets creating their own materials was that they were obviously capturing and understanding exactly what the client needs were in that particular
Sure.
country or market. So, I could definitely see a need to create some sort of framework. And we actually started with a European framework, and then over the years have developed it into a global framework, global campaign framework. And, it was really about trying to make sure that firstly our brand, is consistent across the markets, but also as much as possible that client experience is as consistent as possible, because we know that our clients might be in lots of different markets at
Yeah.
once. One client will have lots of different offices and teams, and so we want to make sure that client experience is consistent. And it's also about efficiency, right? How do we create a framework or a model that's as efficient and as effective as possible? The danger of creating a global model, of course, is that you lose that sort of local knowledge, that local insight. And so it's really important that when we built that in collaboration with all of these local teams, and said to them, right, what are the good bits about a global framework? What are the bad bits? And how can we work together to make sure that we come up with, the best that we can? And, it's not 100% perfect all of the time, but I do feel that we've got a good balance.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of every brief, so at the beginning of every campaign, we have a brief. We bring in all the local markets right at the beginning, so that they understand what this campaign is going to be about. They can sort of put their hand up and say, that's going to work in my market, that's not. And we make sure that they are involved throughout that process. So it's certainly not a case of the center or the global team delivering,
No.
some stuff, and
Yeah.
the local teams are expected to, execute that in their market. It's very collaborative.
What was the sort of perception from the local teams? Was that welcomed? Did you have to win some hearts and minds along the way in order to get that over the line?
I think people could see, the value of it, but I
Hmm.
think there will always be a little bit of, well, what about my market? Am I going to lose? Local clients are obviously very important, and how do I make sure that we retain that relationship with our local
Yeah.
clients? So I think, like anything, when you're trying to sort of sell something in, it's about showing success stories, showing how others are doing it,
Mm.
and continuing to show those success stories as we go.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone that's going through that process, what would be your kind of like, do this, but steer clear of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said, it would really be about bringing your local teams really early into the
Yeah.
process, and make sure they feel that it's your one team creating this framework, or process, or whatever that is. Um, and keep listening throughout the journey. Keep listening. And now our campaign framework is running very smoothly, but we make sure we keep listening. There's we have ability. We have a feedback loop. We make sure that we're getting feedback from the local markets and the global team, of course, and keep evolving and sort of nuancing the framework as you go.
The other area I'm keen to talk around is the role of marketing and the opportunities or maybe limitations imposed upon it by regulations that we work within. And obviously those regulations are also different globally
Yeah.
as well. HSBC Asset Management, how do you adapt your strategies and potentially team structures to cope with that while still meeting the fundamental objective, which
Yeah.
is driving growth within the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could talk for hours on regulatory change in asset management. I mean, it's just, it's thick and fast, and I don't think it's going to change
No,
anytime soon. And
but you
so
got to live with it, haven't
you have
you?
to live with it. It's the new normal, but we also have to understand how we can obviously maintain, uh, be compliant, create compliant materials, but at the same time have an element of creativity,
Yeah,
and also obviously drive, like you said, drive the business, drive the commercial success of the business, whilst at the same time mitigating risk. And that
yeah.
balance is we're walking a bit of a tightrope on that, I think.
On one hand, you think that you may suck all the life out of everything, but on the other hand, there's an argument that great creativity is often created when you're imposing limitations on it. So there's the kind of natural marketer in me sort of wants to rise to the challenge, but it has been challenging.
It has been challenging, and it's the creativity, but it's also the time. If you're
Yeah,
spending a vast amount of time doing regulatory reviews or creating new guidance about how you can adhere to new regulation, that obviously becomes a capacity issue for your team. And you mentioned earlier the global regulations. Of course, anyone who's listening to this from the UK has probably just been through the anti-greenwashing regs that came out at the end of May. But then equally, we have a SFDR in Europe and other regulations all around the world, which are same but different, and
yeah,
and so we have to make sure that we have, again, frameworks and procedures that are sort of highest level of compliance, but then obviously equally making sure we hit all the local regulations as
yeah.
well. So it's really hard, and I think that's part of financial services marketing though now, is you have to be an expert in regulation. You have to be an expert, in responsible investing, sustainable investing, and you have to have really good relationships, not just with your sales stakeholders or investment stakeholders, but equally compliance, risk,
Yeah.
control office, all of these areas. You're having multiple dialogues a day, every single day.
When we talked previously about the global campaign framework, you've got that from a kind of creative point of view,
Yeah,
but then you've got your regulatory framework that you've got to kind of place on top of that and then create that to work in the localized
yeah.
environments in a way that still facilitates consistency but speed of delivery as well. It suddenly becomes a complex task, doesn't it?
It is a complex task, and I think going back to what I was saying earlier about just understanding all that right at the beginning,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and saying, rather than getting two-thirds of the way down the line and then one market saying, oh, we can't do that because,
Mm,
and then you're kind of backpedaling, try and understand all of that right at the very very beginning,
yeah.
and have a very, you need to, we always have had to, but continue to build that very collaborative relationship with the compliance teams, so that everybody understands, what we're trying to achieve. Everyone understands the kind of the framework that we were trying to achieve it within, and just see where you can go from there to make sure you can retain that creativity.
I was going to ask you a question on this later, but it feels right to do this now. Is around the teams, because there's a lot going on there, a lot of moving parts, and the key to probably successfully navigating that is clear communication with a multitude of teams, but all, like you said, getting them all aligned and working in the same role. And you talked before about how you have your strategic objectives from the business, but then you use these as part of your team roles and managing performance of individual teams. Can you give us an overview of how you sit in your role and manage to deliver all of those competing requirements, and still drive growth?
Well, we're good jugglers, aren't we? I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's one thing. No, I really think that if what we have to do is is sort of help the teams to understand why they're here, why they're turning up to work, and like you said, how are they adding value and driving
Mm.
growth? Now, when it comes to regulation, it might be difficult for somebody at first glance to say, well, how is what I'm doing, this whatever it is, anti-greenwashing, etc., how review or this piece of material, how is that adding to business growth? But we need to show that to people. We need to help our teams to understand how what they're doing is mitigating risk, therefore is, driving business and driving growth.
So is that educating them? Do you mean by that? Or
Yeah, I suppose so. I suppose so. It's educating in terms of just sort of joining dots for people when it comes to what the role that they're doing and the activity that they're doing on a day-to-day basis, and how that is adding value to the overall business. So that we're all working towards that same end goal. There is obviously an element of education, there's an element of training, and for example around regulation, and that's important too, so that everybody understands, clearly, and they're not trying to find that information out themselves, because then that takes time and
yeah.
doesn't feel very motivating. So providing people with the right material, the right content, the right tools, the right training, so that they feel confident in
Mm.
their day to day.
Is there a consistent approach to training across the global team? How many is in the global team?
So there's about 40 odd in the wholesale
Okay.
marketing team. And yeah, I would say, for some of the key themes and key topics, we have consistent training for regulation.
Yeah.
When it comes to broader marketing training, then absolutely, yeah, everybody has access to the consistent training.
Yeah. Okay. It's a fast-paced, evolving space, marketing. I mean, we had a previous podcast, and we were talking about we're talking about marketing technology, and I know you've got some views on
Yeah.
marketing technology, but those images where it sort of shows you, okay, these are all the different software that sits within marketing technology, and it seems that picture gets bigger every year, and it's almost like one of those, I don't know, Chuck Close pictures now, made up of loads of different images. And how do you keep your team educated across marketing when it seems to be exploding, and it's almost hard to become an expert in marketing because there's so many different subsectors within marketing now?
Yeah, especially when you're a sort of general marketeer,
Yeah.
and you might not be a digital expert or a content expert. You might be a channel marketing manager, and you're doing things across all the different formats. Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one to answer, but I think that's what makes it fun as well.
Yeah.
That's helps us to feel.
Do you set up your teams as generalists, or do you look for specialities within?
So the way we're structured is around the client segment. So
Okay.
specialists in terms of particular client groups. So you'll be an institutional or a wholesale marketeer, or you might be a product marketeer to have that sort of deep technical expertise. For example, from the events front, yes, we do have people who are specialists in events,
Yeah.
but otherwise it is, people do need to have that sort of broad understanding of all the different technologies, and it's a difficult landscape. It's like you said, it's ever changing.
Yeah.
What we can do is, as I think as marketing leaders, is to try and demonstrate the technology that's available that we feel is right for what we're trying to achieve at the moment.
Mm.
Spend all day looking at all these different technologies, but actually, we just got to keep our eye on the prize, which is, does this tech help with our business objective? It might be bright and shiny and brilliant, but actually, does it help us to meet the objective? And if it doesn't, let's just park that for now. We keep looking at it. But we all know how long it takes to get tech on board. We know how long, it's difficult to get investment. So we
Mm.
have to choose very very wisely, and not be kind of distracted by the
No,
bright
no.
and shiny.
Yeah, I think there's so much of that in marketing at the moment that
Yeah,
is, you could get lost in it, couldn't you?
you could.
I know that you've been involved within selling ideas of marketing technology into HSBC. Can you give me your views on that, about the approach that you take? Because as you say, it's a long process.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to know how you go about tackling that in a global business. such as
Yeah,
HSBC.
yeah, and there'll be lots of different people in lots of different teams, trying to get different forms of technology sort of implemented into the business. And I think as marketing, we are, marketing technology is kind of critical and will remain to be a really, really important part of what we're doing. But from a tech perspective, in an asset management firm, you also got front office technology, back
Yeah.
office technology, ops technology, so you're also almost competing with investment around all types of technology and integrations. So and some of those other areas, it's easy to demonstrate the value that a new front office system might bring. So we have to step up and show the value that a piece of marketing technology or a marketing technology stack will bring. And I think one of the first things to do is to understand why there might be some sort of skepticism around marketing technology or martech. So, for example, is it a cost issue ultimately?
Mm.
Is there an integration? Is it a bit of an integration headache for somebody? Is it someone's been burnt by a previous thing going wrong? Like what is the skepticism sort
Yeah.
of around? And I think if you can do that, you can really unlock some of these conversations. And then of course you have to build your business case. So
Yeah.
you need to. I know I keep coming back to it, but you've got to show how it's going to drive value.
Mm.
Using case studies, using examples from both within and outside your industry to really demonstrate that value and make it an evidence-based
Mm.
conversation.
Almost a business plan.
A business plan, absolutely.
Yeah.
Marketeers. Going back to our very earlier conversation, we're not colouring in people, right? We
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
business people, and we should be demonstrating how we understand how the business operates. So you're building a business case, and as I said, just have lots of case studies, have lots of evidence, have a very consultative approach to
Mm.
those conversations that you're having. If it doesn't work the first time, try again.
Yeah.
Go in, have a think about why that conversation didn't particularly land well. Think about the feedback that you've got. Think about a different angle. Do you need more evidence? Do you need more data for those conversations? The other thing I would say is start small. Try something small, pilot it in a particular,
Get proof.
proof
Yeah.
of concept, exactly, and just keep going. These conversations can sometimes take a long time, years even,
Yeah.
but you've got to have the energy and the passion to keep saying, no, I really think this is important, and I really think this is going to drive the business forward.
Do you think that obviously within asset management, it's an industry which is heavily involved within technology, has been for a number of years. Because of that, there's also legacy technology. You mentioned about there may be competing priorities within the business. Do you think that the fact that there's, I guess, marketing and martech is relatively new when you consider some of the legacy technology that's been around? Do you think that impacts the abilities to sometimes fast track this new technology, marketing technology that's out there? Do you think that's
I don't know. I think, yeah, it
Mm.
could, because, there could be some really sort of long-standing legacy systems in another part of the business that need maintaining, and, that's
Yeah.
where a lot of the sort of investment is going. But I think that also gives us an opportunity to say, well, that's been happening, but we've got to keep evolving. We've got to keep innovating.
Yeah.
And, if there's something small that we can try here, let's just try and kind of get it into that process. Yeah, I think we should just try and look for the ways that we can move forward, rather than sort of just focusing on what has been in the past.
Yeah, because I think when people think about marketing technology, sometimes it's from a point of view of how can we do our marketing better? How can we essentially sell more?
Yeah.
But I think that's missing the point around the customer experience point of view, because we're all ultimately end consumers. We're all humans consuming different products, services. Clients of HSBC Asset Management are no different, and they are all very we're all experts now, aren't we, at experiencing
Yeah.
those digital environments. And I think we expect that from the brands and businesses that we use. And I think that if you don't invest in those, you're perhaps shooting yourselves in the foot, because everyone now knows what a good consistent digital experience looks like across multiple touch points.
Yeah. We have this conversation about B2B marketing more broadly, and there's, you might think, oh, B2B marketing is about sort of like some sort of robot on the end of that experience,
Yeah,
and it's not. It's a person,
yeah,
who, like you say, is probably stuck to their phone all day long and experiencing that sort of that end-to-end digital experience. So we have to think about that, and we should always be driven by, our clients' needs. And for us in a B2B environment, it's our clients, but it's our customers of our clients
yeah,
as well. And in terms of wealth and investing, those end customers, they're demanding more and more just mobile first investing. We're seeing this sort of, the industry changing towards that way. So if you roll that back to the asset management firms, we have to have that same technology and that investment in technology to make sure that that is rolling through right
yeah.
to that very end customer experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's a demanding end customer, isn't it? And
Hmm.
it seems to be increasing
Yeah.
ever more. Within marketing, brand is there's obviously the conflicting between the long and the short, the brand activation versus short-term sales. You're working as with a huge global brand. You see it, fantastic consistency. Every airport you land in, HSBC is there. Brilliant. HSBC Asset Management is very well known in some markets and less so in others. How does the support of that global brand help you drive growth in newer markets, perhaps that you're not so well known in?
Yeah, well, as you say, the strength of our global brand, the HSBC global brand, is kind of second to none, and I think we're very fortunate to have that backing. And I suppose with that brand also comes the kind of the resources and the sort of the teams and the strength of the sort of underlying attributes of that brand. So in markets where the HSBC brand, the sort of mother brand, isn't as well known, I think we still have lots to build from, because we have that brand equity in other markets, that we can make sure we have that consistency in messaging, in how we're showing up. And even though that HSBC brand might not be as well known, there's still some very powerful messages and underlying sort of stories and narrative that we can build from. So, if we're saying, for example, in our asset management messaging, we'd be talking about the strength of our global networks. Well, that exists whether that brand, that mother brand, exists in that market or not. So the
Yes.
fact we have investment professionals all around the world, the sort of the products that we're able to create, the resources that we have, that's the really powerful part. And I think from the asset management brand development point of view, we will always leverage the global brand.
To kind of tying that back to the global framework,
Yeah.
and you've got local market activations. How much flex is there within for local markets to do things, to tailor their communications?
I think there definitely is flexibility, and there needs to be.
Yeah,
I wouldn't sort of say there's one way or the highway. It's just you have to execute the brand in this particular way. I think we always have to make sure we listen to cultural sensitivities. We listen to individual client needs in markets. And what's really important about these conversations, though, is that they're data driven. That
yeah,
it's not just the whim of somebody saying, well, in our market it's this, or in our
mm,
market it's that.
yeah,
Obviously those conversations are important. Those people are on the ground, they're living and breathing the brand in their market, and they're also talking to customers every day. But we have to have data to back that up.
mhm,
So that will come down to, for example, if you're testing, I don't know, doing some A/B testing in a market, you might have an advert that you're testing, and you might be just testing nuances and changes. All of that is really, really important to say, this ad or this piece of content just did not land in this market, and these are the reasons we think why. We're going to prove that hypothesis by changing something and
yeah.
testing again. And so data is so important in those brand conversations.
I'm intrigued there about, we're diving into another route there around market research and market testing.
Yeah.
Is that something close to your heart within your approach to marketing?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think data-driven decisions are really, really important. And this all ties back to the conversation we've had around how we're demonstrating the value, how we're sort of laddering up what we're doing back to the business objectives. it is difficult to, not everybody will be in the same place. Not everybody has access to the same, resources, tech platforms when it comes to metrics. But I would say just you've got to start somewhere,
Yeah.
so
Pilot approach,
pilot approach,
build out.
exactly. I mean, some of these KPIs and the metrics and measurements are easier to get hold of than others. But you just try, give it a go, see what you can get, and see what themes that you can start to pull out. So you might not have budget to work with market research agencies. You might not be able to do big brand tracking studies, but there are other ways. Can you, is there a third party study that you can be a part of? Can you start to build your own sort of benchmarks, in the marketing sense, not in the investment sense? Can you start to build those by looking at the data that you've got internally? We do have, if you have, for example, access to a basic email platform, you will have data,
Yeah.
and really try and work with your partners to try and get the most data from them that you can.
Yeah.
But the sort of magic is, looking at the data and coming up with some insight. That's the really important.
Yeah. Data on its own is no good. You've
Yeah.
got to be able to use that and
Yeah.
form an opinion.
Exactly. And turn that into the language that your stakeholders also understand and it resonates with them.
Yeah. Great advice. Within trends of what you foresee coming down the line, I'm interested to know what's from both perspective of what's next for HSBC Asset Management, what are the things that you're working on, but what do you see the trends and the changes that are things that you've got your eye on?
The crystal ball moment.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, there's a few things that I think are coming down the track or are already here actually, and things that we need to to be really listening out for. I mean, digital, the digital landscape, I think we've touched on that a little bit, but that can mean so many things. The digital landscape, digital marketing can, again, have a big definition, but that can be anything from, the types of formats that we're using, the content, how clients and customers are digesting content is changing and ever evolving. And so we have to make sure that, we are keeping up with that, and in fact are innovating ahead of that curve, so that we're providing content in a way that people are going to digest it. What I mentioned earlier, sort of mobile first investing. I think that will be the future, and we for HSBC and our competitors are definitely moving towards that. So I think digitalization or digital marketing is going to be a big trend, and I suppose part of that is also personalization. Now I've heard many different discussions on personalization, whether it's coming or it's dead, or it's where are we with that? But again, I think our clients are they are demanding a more personalized experience, and client experience will just become more and more sort of integral to our plans. So I suppose that's a broad topic, but sort of that digitalization, personalization space. We touched earlier on regulation. I don't think that's going away. We need to make sure we are innovating to make sure that we can keep up with that, or not keep up with, but sort of we can respond to that regulatory environment, with our teams, with technology, with how that sort of becomes a commercial, there's a commercial element to regulation. And then another one I would say, again, lots of discussions on this, is AI. So how AI impacts asset management marketing. I'm sure, like many of my colleagues, we've heard lots of discussions, we've been to conferences on this, we've heard seminars, etc. And there's a lot of opinion on it. But what's interesting is I seem to hear a common theme around AI, which is about, Gen AI. There's lots of kind of moral and ethical kind of considerations when it comes to Gen AI, and it'll be really interesting to see where that goes for marketeers. But I think what's here and now is kind of how we use AI in terms of automation, effectiveness, operational effectiveness, and that is what, for us, that's what we're really concentrating on at the moment. Again, looking at like regulation, looking at digital, how can we use AI and automation to help in those spaces? So I think, without having a crystal ball, I think that the digital landscape, regulation, and AI and tech, the big ones.
Thank you for sharing that. I think I was speaking to someone around AI, and it's, we talked about shiny things of
Mm.
being potentially distracting. Obviously it can it will transform businesses, industries, and create entirely new ones. But fundamentally, you've also got to have the core building blocks around data and marketing in place. This point from it, it's not my point, actually. I can't take credit for this. It's a point from a previous guest on another podcast. But they were saying that if you don't have these building blocks, anything that you do with AI is essentially going to be built on a house of cards. So getting these fundamentals in place first and foremost will give you that strong foundation to take advantage of the
Yeah,
changing landscape.
exactly. And I think automation and effectiveness are the ways to sort of that's the right lens at the moment.
Yeah,
And then as things develop, on the creative side, whether that's translation, that all of these things we should definitely keep looking at. But
yeah.
I agree with your previous guest. You've got to have those building blocks in place.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for taking
Thank
the
you.
time today and coming and having a chat with us.
Thanks for having me.
Really, really good to learn more about you and your two hats, dual roles. Wish you all the success in the future. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks.
Thank you for listening today to The Growth Engine. If you enjoyed this episode and like to hear more, please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from and follow us on LinkedIn for regular updates or on hubagency.co.uk. Thank you and see you next time.